Hello, and welcome to my very first reading of Jane Eyre, and this will be chapter 1. So what I'm going to do in this session is I'm just going to read through chapter 1 with you, and just at the very end, go through a summary of what's gone on in the chapter, and we'll continue on. I understand that this is quite a popular choice of schools, and the language is very difficult, but with some perseverance, we'll get through it. So let's begin with Jane Eyre, chapter 1. So it says, there was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering, indeed, in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning. But since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so somber and rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight with nipped fingers and toes and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. The said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside, and with her darlings about her, dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavoring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were, she really must exclude me from privileges intended only for content, happy little children. What does Bessie say I've done? I asked. Jane, I don't like cavaliers or questioners. Besides, there's something truly forbidding in a child taking up her elders in this manner. Be seated somewhere, and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent. A breakfast room adjoined the drawing room. I slipped in there. It contained a bookcase. I soon possessed myself a volume, taking care that it should be one stored with pictures. I mounted into the window seat, gathered up my feet. I sat cross-legged like a Turk, and having drawn the red moreen curtain nearly close, I was shrined in double retirement. Folds of scarlet drapery shut my view into the right hand. To the left were the clear panes of glass, protecting but not separating me from the drear November day. At intervals, while turning over the leaves of my book, I studied the aspect of that winter afternoon. Afar, it offered a pale, blank mist and cold near a scene of wet lawn and storm-beat shrub, with ceaseless rain sweeping away wildly before a long, lamentable blast. I returned to my book. Barrick's History of British Birds. The letterpress thereof I cared little for, generally speaking, and yet there were certain introductory pages that, child as I was, could not pass quite as blank. There were those which treat of the haunts of seafowl, of solitary rocks and promontories, by them only inhabited, off the coast of Norway, studded with isles, with its southern extremity, the Lydness, or the Nez of the North Cape. Where the northern ocean in vast whirls boils around the naked melancholy isles of farthest Thule, and Atlantic surge pours in among the stormy Hebrides. Nor could I pass unnoticed the suggestion of bleak shores of Lapland, Siberia, Spitsbergen, Nova Zembla, Iceland, Greenland, with the vast sweep of the Arctic zone and those forlorn regions of dreary space, that reservoir of frost and snow, where firm fields of ice, the accumulation of centuries of winters, glazed in alpine heights above heights, surround the pole and concentre the multiple rigors of extreme cold. Of these death-white realms, I formed an idea of my own, shadowy like all the half-comprehended notions that float dim through the child's brains, but strangely impressive. The words in these introductory pages connected themselves with the succeeding vignettes and gave significance to the rock standing up alone in a sea of billow and spray, to a broken boat stranded on a desolate coast, to the cold and ghastly moon glancing through the bars of cloud at a wreck just sinking. I cannot tell what sentiment haunted the quiet, solitary churchyard with this inscribed headstone, its gate, its 2 trees, its low horizon girdled by a broken wall, and its newly risen crescent attesting the hour of eventide. The 2 ships becalmed on a torpid sea, I believe to be marine phantoms. The fiend pinning down the thief's pack behind him, I passed over quickly. It was an object of terror. So was the black-horned thing seated aloof on a rock, surveying a distant crowd surrounding a gallows. Each picture told a story, mysterious often to my undeveloped understanding and imperfect feelings, yet ever profoundly interesting as the tales Bessie sometimes narrated on winter evenings when she chanced to be in good humor, and when, having brought her ironing table to the nursery hearth, she allowed us to sit about it, and while she got up with Mrs. Reed's lace frills crimpled her nightcap borders, fed our eager attention with passages of love and adventure taken from old fairy tales and other ballads, or, as I later period discovered, from my pages of Pamela and Henry, Earl of Morland. With Barrack on my knee, I was then happy in at least my way. I feared nothing but interruption, and that came too soon. The breakfast room door opened. "Bah, Madam Mope," cried the voice of John Reed. Then he paused. He found the room apparently empty. "Where the dickens is she?" he continued. "Lizzie, Georgie," calling to his sisters. "Joan is not here. Tell Mama she's run out into the rain. Bad animal." It is well I drew the curtain, thought I. I wished fervently he might not discover my hiding place, nor would John Reed have found it out himself. He was not quick, either of vision or conception, but Eliza just put her head in at the door and said at once, "She's in the window seat, to be sure, Jack." As I came out immediately, for I trembled at the idea of being dragged forth by the said Jack. "What do you want?" I asked with awkward indifference. "Say, what do you want, Master Reed?" was the answer. "I want you to come here." And seating himself in the armchair, he initiated by a gesture that I was to approach and stand before him. John Reed was a schoolboy of 14 years old, 4 years older than I, for I was but 10, large and stout for his age, with a dingy and unwholesome skin, thick lineaments and spacious visage, heavy limbs and large extremities. He gorged himself habitually at table, which made him bilious and gave him a dim and bleary-eyed, flabby cheeks. He ought now to have been at school, but his mamma had taken him home for a month or 2 on account of his delicate health. Mr. Miles, the master, affirmed that he would do very well if he had fewer cakes and sweetmeats sent him from home. But the mother's heart turned from an opinion so harsh and inclined rather to the more refined idea that John's sallowness was owing to over-application and perhaps to pining after home. John had not much affection for his mothers and his sisters, and antipathy to me. He bullied and punished me, not for 2 or 3 times a week, nor once or twice in the day, but continually. Every nerve I had feared him, and every morsel of flesh in my bones shrank when he came near. There were moments when I was bewildered by the terror he inspired, because I had no appeal whatever against either his menaces or his inflictions. The servants did not like to offer their young master to offend their young master by taking my part against him, and Mrs. Reed was blind and deaf to the subject. She never saw him strike or heard him abuse me, though he did, both now and then, in her very presence, more frequently, however, behind her back. Habitually obedient to John, I came up to his chair. He spent some 3 minutes in thrusting out his tongue at me as far as he could without damaging the roots. I knew he would soon strike, and while dreading the blow, I mused on the disgusting and ugly appearance of him who would presently deal it. I wonder if he read the notion in my face, for all at once, without speaking, he struck, suddenly and strong. I tottered on regaining my equilibrium, retired back a step or two from his chair. That's for your imprudence in answering Mama a while, said he, and for your sneaking away and getting behind the curtains, and for the look you had in your eyes 2 minutes since, you rat. Accustomed to John Reed's abuse, I never had any idea of replying to it. My care was now to endure the blow, which certainly followed the insult. What were you doing behind the curtain? He asked. I was reading. Show the book. I returned to the window and fetched it thence. You have no business to take our books. You are a dependent. Mamma says you have no money. Your father left you none. You ought to beg and not to live here with the gentlemen's children like us, and eat the same meals we do, and wear clothes at our mamma's expense. Now I'll teach you to rummage my bookshelves, for they are mine. All the house belongs to me, or you will do in a few years, or will do in a few years. Go and stand by the door, out of the way of the mirror and the windows. I did so, not at first aware was his intention, but when I saw him lift and poise the book and stand erect to hurl it, I instinctively started aside with a cry of alarm. Not soon enough. However, the volume was flung. It hit me, and I fell, striking my head against the door, cutting it. The cut bled. The pain was sharp. My terror had passed its climax. Other feelings succeeded. Wicked and cruel boy, I said, you are like a murderer. You are like a slave driver. You are like the Roman emperors. I had read Goldsmith's History of Rome and had formed my opinion of Nero's Caligula, and also I had drawn parallels in silence, which I never thought thus to have declared aloud. What? What? He cried. Did you say that to me? Did you hear her, Eliza and Georgiana? Won't I tell Mama? But first, he ran headlong at me. I felt him grasp my hair and my shoulder. He had close with a desperate thing. I really saw him a tyrant, a murderer. I felt a drop or two of blood from my head trickle down my neck, and it was sensible of somewhat pungent sufferings. These sensations for the time predominated over fear, and I received him in a frantic sort. I don't very well know what I did with my hands, but he called me rat, rat, and bellowed out aloud. Aid was near him. Eliza and Georgiana had run for Mrs. Reed, who was gone upstairs. She had now come upon the scene, followed by Bessie and her maid Abbott. We were parted, and I heard the words, Dear, dear, what a fury to fly at my Master John. Did ever anybody see such a picture of passion? Then Mrs. Reed subjoined, Take her away to the Red Room and lock her in there. 4 hands were immediately laid upon me, and I was borne upstairs. Okay, so what's happened is Jane Eyre is an orphan, and she's sent to live with her aunt and her cousins, and they resent this. Her family left her nothing, so she was poor. So that was the reference that John made. So what's happened is that Master John Reed, he's the boy, he's only 14 years old. He's a bit above his station, but he really does not like her, and they get into a fight. She's sent to read a book. He has come back, he's found her reading. That was the whole conversation of, you shouldn't be reading my books. They get into a fight. This time, instead of enduring the abuse and the insults that he usually hurls at her, she strikes back and she hits him. She's had enough. So Mrs. Reed, who's the mother, comes, the maids come, and they have to break them up. And then she is sent to this place called the Red Room. The Red Room is a very scary place. It's a place of punishment. It is where actually her husband passed away. In the Victorian era, people often did pass away at home. Okay, so that is Jane Eyre chapter 1. That is just a very, very quick synopsis of it. I'll continue reading through, And if anybody is enjoying these videos, these reading videos, and if it is helping them, please tell me. And please do tell me some things that you would like to see. Please do subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back very soon with Jane Eyre Chapter 2.